All right, so the Ten Commandments. We've all heard of the Ten Commandments. We all know the Ten Commandments ever since we were children. Most of us, I'd say, maybe it's going too far saying all of us, but most of us, we've encountered these Ten Commandments as part of several of these Bible stories we go through. We all know them to some extent. We all perhaps at one stage really got into reading about them and thinking that we could try to observe them. We think of them generally as some kind of moral instructions that God gave to human society, that if we follow these moral instructions, we'll have a good life among each other here in humanity, and we'll probably have a good life too. We'll probably be rewarded afterwards. That's generally how it's thought of. And a lot of us try to observe them. A lot of us respect and value these commandments according to our face value understanding of them. The older we get, probably the more we start breaking a few here and there. And at a certain point, we start thinking, well, some are a bit more severe than others, or at least I'm not breaking the severe ones, like, for example, thou shalt not kill. Maybe I haven't gone that far, but sometimes maybe the Saturday, the Shabbat, the Sabbath, I'm breaking that one here and there. So that's not as bad. So this is generally how they come into our lives, and a lot of people believe in them. A lot of people don't believe in them. Even those who don't believe in them, no matter what religion they are, they still generally value these Ten Commandments. But is this understanding that we have of the Ten Commandments, is that what they really are? Is that are they just these moral instructions for us to implement according to how we hear them at face value in society? So in this session of Kabbalah Explained Simply, we're going to get into what Kabbalah says about this, where the answer to that, in short, is no, in terms of the wisdom of Kabbalah, that as the wisdom of Kabbalah is a method for taking us, people, anybody who has a desire for it, from this world to a higher reality. So likewise, when we reach that higher reality, we discover how all these Kabbalistic texts that have been written throughout history, with the Torah being a key one of them, where the Ten Commandments are written, they speak to us only about that spiritual reality, which is a reality that is beyond our current perception and sensation of reality, beyond our five senses, beyond everything we can even imagine, because everything we imagine is still taking up some kind of corporeal form, some kind of corporeal time, space, and motion. And that's generally how we read all those Bible stories, including the story of the Ten Commandments. We usually think of it as all kinds of people, for example, the people of Israel in the story, following a leader, Moses, who we think of as another person, who takes them to the foot of Mount Sinai, a mountain, this is how we generally think of it, and who climbs that mountain and receives the Ten Commandments upon that mountain, given to him as these two tablets from a god. And sometimes we think of that God as well as some kind of human form. In general, we're always putting together these things that we read about in these texts into some kind of corporeal forms, objects, images, places. We think of it as historical events. But the wisdom of Kabbalah says that there is a deeper spiritual meaning to all of this, which describes it as a process that we can be engaged in that process right now. It's a process that we can apply to ourselves as a method. And when we apply it to ourselves, then we see completely different definitions beyond all those surface things that I just mentioned. And that's what we're going to talk about today, exactly what these Ten Commandments are. What's this story that these Ten Commandments fit in? And we'll go through each one of them one by one and talk a little bit about it. There's immense depth to them. We can spend a long time on them, but we'll try to touch on a little bit deeper into the spiritual meaning of these Ten Commandments as we get into it. So in terms of the story itself, so I said it, there's a group called the people of Israel. Firstly, people of Israel, what's that? it's not nationality. It's not how we normally think of it. If we just cut over to here, so start writing some of these things down. Israel, the people of Israel. So Israel, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, comes from two words, Yashar El, or Yashar Kel, which translates to straight to God. God, too, is defines the upper force, a force that we also can call the creator or nature. God and nature in Gematria is the same number, 86. It means in the wisdom of Kabbalah that they are one and the same thing. So it's this desire, it's describing a desire that's shared by anyone who wants it. It's not anyone who feels this desire to, who feels that they want something unknown, something beyond this world, something beyond everything we can perceive here. And moreover, and especially at that time, that when there is this feeling of some kind of growing problems, growing crisis in our world, in our reality, so we also start feeling that there is a problem with our corporeal desires, there's a problem with our ego. You often see all kinds of methods dealing with the ego in some kind of way, because it's generally considered that this ego is something bad, and a lot of methods try to deal with this ego. How do we work with this ego? So this desire of Israel, straight to God, straight to the upper force, Yashar Kel, it's a desire which is above all of our earthly desires. In short, we call it a desire for spirituality. It's a desire where it's characterized by asking questions such as what is the meaning of life? Why are we here in this world? It asks the why questions much more than all the what and how questions. Let's put it this way, where within all of our package that we're given in terms of our desires, what are our desires? Food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, and finally spirituality. This tiny point within us which wants something other than all those desires. It cannot pinpoint exactly what it is, because as we said, spirituality cannot be perceived by our five senses. We cannot imagine that spiritual reality. We cannot even think or in any kind of way close to what that is, because at the end of the day, spirituality is an opposite reality to our current one. It's one which is governed by laws of giving, love, bestowal, which is opposite to the way that all of our desires work, which all of our desires want to take. Every single desire is characterized as a desire to receive enjoyment for personal benefit. If we look into all those desires I just mentioned, food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, at the very base, they are all a desire to receive enjoyment for personal benefit. And the desire for spirituality comes from a different place entirely. That one is connecting all the way up to what's called the root of our soul in the wisdom of Kabbalah, meaning the place where we are all adhered to a single desire, where we connect to an eternal reality, completely invisible to our current one, which we perceive in these dimensions of time, space, motion. And that desire works on us. It works on different people at different times, but anyone who feels that desire working on them, and it's expressed by asking questions like, what is the meaning of life? What is reality? Why is there so much suffering in the world? Why? Where did we come from? Where are we even now? What does it mean that we're here on this planet, in this universe? And where are we all headed? What's our future going to be like? All these questions all come from this higher plane, specifically to us, specifically to humans, and not to animals, not to plants, not to rocks, in order to raise us to the purpose of our lives, to raise us to the full attainment of what our desire ultimately wants, what all of those desires ultimately want, which is enjoyment. At an egoistic level at this world, all of those desires, food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, they all receive enjoyment in transient ways. We feel an enjoyment and it fades away. We lose it the moment we start receiving it. And it always makes us wanting to go after more and more flavors, more and more enjoyments. But the desire for spirituality specifically doesn't come into any of these current what's called vessels. It doesn't fit into this whole reality that we're in. Rather, we need to change ourselves in order to enter another reality, in order to perceive and sense with a new sense that we currently don't have, which doesn't exist within our sense of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. But it's what could be considered a sixth sense, where it's characterized by attaining a sense of loving, bestowing to others as we love ourselves. So just imagine that instead of feeling yourself at the center of every single pleasure and every single fulfillment and every single thing that you can possibly think about, instead of feeling that there is this information outside of you and it becomes absorbed into some kind of center within you, and that's where you feel pleasure, suffering, according to whether that desire is being fulfilled or not. So instead of that, imagine that you have that inverts, and that place where everyone else around you feels that pleasure, that you're feeling that as yourself. As I said, it cannot be imagined. That gives some kind of picture as to what the spiritual reality is, that we invert that center where we feel our egoistic self, which is disconnected from 7 to 8 billion other people that we perceive around us, which is disconnected from all the vegetative plant life around us, and all the other different animals and all the rocks and this whole universe. We perceive this little point as being me in our egoistic lives, separated from this whole reality outside of us. Spirituality is an inversion of that, where we perceive everything that is seemingly outside of us as that self. And specifically in relation to other people and the desires of other people, we feel this collective soul as that self, meaning instead of feeling myself as this thing that absorbs constantly, in which sometimes I want food, sometimes I want sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, all those desires, and I want pleasure to fulfill them at different degrees here and there. So instead of that, I'm feeling rather this as one cell, meaning me as one cell in this body of, you could call it humanity, or more correctly, when we reach that level, that's our soul, where we're all connected as one, and we feel that as ourself. It's like each one of us is a cell in this massive whole, and that's our soul. So the desire for that desire is called Israel. And anyone who feels that desire is called a person of Israel, the people of Israel. So the people of Israel, it's not a biological group. It's actually defined by a group of people who were around before the time of this story specifically that we're speaking about, before the time of Moses and the Ten Commandments. It was in Abraham's time, a few hundred years earlier than that. It was a group of people from around Babylon, which was some kind of mini model of humanity at the time, where at that time, there's also the Tower of Babel story. Maybe we'll get into that one at another time. But at that time, they felt a certain crisis in society. In the Tower of Babel story, it was expressed as all kinds of people getting all kinds of being given different languages to speak, and in short, what they felt was a lot of social division, a lot of hatred rising up among society. Sounds kind of familiar with our current times, right? But anyway, they felt all this social division among them, and people who couldn't tolerate that anymore and felt that they needed something beyond this world, which is specifically why suffering is given to us, so that we will develop a desire to look outside of our current, the way we currently live. Because if we don't get suffering, then we'd all remain as pure, you could say, cavemen, just being happy with food, sex, family, and nothing else. We wouldn't have anything to aspire to beyond that. But specifically because we get suffering in the whole range of corporeal desires we have. So that's what brings on this new desire for something outside this world. They wanted to know the meaning of all this. Why is there suffering in the world? What's going on here? And it's specifically that they're being prodded to from behind by this general force of nature, what's called God, what's called the Creator. They're being prodded to reach a level where they need to discover discover the full meaning of being human. The word for human in Hebrew is Adam. It comes from the word domeh, similar to the upper force, domeh le'elion, or similar to the Most High. That's the true meaning of being human, meaning that where we are now, our inborn bodies, that we were born as babies and we grew up to become egoists, working according to all those desires and living according to the desires I mentioned, that's not called human according to the spiritual sense of the term. Human means that we develop ourselves from here consciously to develop these attitudes where the whole of society and all of humanity becomes that center where we feel all the pleasure and everything dwelling. So that's Israel. These are the people of Israel. And you can see here already how the people of Israel, the first part of this story of the Ten Commandments, they can be you and me right now. Anyone who feels that desire, some desire for something beyond this world. Also, it's a feeling of being fed up with all the division and hatred to a point where this desire for unity, the desire for connection with others, a more genuine connection, a more meaningful connection emerges within us. And specifically those people where this desire emerges are called the people of Israel. So the people of Israel camped at the foot of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, what's this? Mount Sinai. Now if we're talking in terms of a spiritual process. So Sinai, hang on, we want to go over here. Right, so yeah, Mount Sinai. Okay, so Sinai in Hebrew comes from the word for hatred, sinah. So that's hatred. So what are we talking about? A mountain of hatred. Now we can already see it within ourselves, right? This egoistic quality that defines human nature, where we constantly want to absorb into ourselves. When we go to connect with others, so when we get a method, we apply the method which tells us that spirituality isn't by detaching ourselves from society, going and meditating on a mountain all day, but rather spirituality is in forming a society and working in society and feeling how everyone is 99.9% egoistic. We all have this base human nature of wanting to receive benefit at the expense of others. That's our base nature, and it's grown over time, and specifically today it's bigger than ever. So we feel this great division and hatred the more we connect as a society. We're really living in interesting times, even if we just think generally today. The more interconnected and interdependent the world's becoming, the more human population is growing and growing, over to 8 billion people or so by now. So at the same time, with all these people around us, and you'd think that we'd feel much more connected, rather the contrary, we're feeling a lot more isolated, a lot more depressed, a lot more empty, a lot more negative sensations are emerging as a result of this. Why? Because even the population growth and all this interconnection all around humanity, it's all a result of this ego that's growing. And the more we encounter other people, the more we feel how other people aren't fulfilling this growing ego. So we reach a point which it's called a point of feeling that we feel hatred toward this quality that we have. We start wanting to exit this quality. We start wanting to do something with this ego. It's why so many people go out and start doing all kinds of spiritual searches, because they want to do something about this ego. A lot of the time when people go out and do these spiritual searches, so they're told that they should, the ego is a problem. It makes us hate other people. It makes us do bad things to other people. It makes us exploit them, abuse them, manipulate them. So it makes sense that we should diminish the ego. It makes sense that we should lessen the ego. And we hear all kinds of things like make yourself as a rock, make yourself as a plant, make that ego smaller. The wisdom of Kabbalah is unique in that it doesn't tell a person to diminish the ego, because he says you cannot diminish the ego. Nature is constantly growing our ego. It doesn't mean that if a person finds themselves in some method where they can do that and get along like that for the rest of their lives, that's fine. The person can find themselves in that, and there are methods that cater to that. However, ultimately we're being all led to a point where this ego is going to keep growing, and we're going to keep seeing more and more crises and explosions bursting in society, as we can see today as well. It doesn't take much to look. You don't even need to turn on the news anymore. You just put an app on your phone and you're getting notifications blasted at you of like crises happening all day. So we're reaching a point where, one which was similar to what's written in this story, where this massive ego is showing itself, and more people are starting to question, why is this happening? How can we do something with this ego? And the wisdom of Kabbalah comes and says at this point, or the Torah, which is one and the same with the wisdom of Kabbalah, it comes and says that this quality, this egoistic quality, it's here because it's constantly growing, and what we need to do is rise above this ego, not to diminish it, because ultimately you won't be able to. Even if you manage for the rest of your life to do it, it'll keep coming back, and in general, in humanity as a whole, it's going to keep growing. So we are in a point where we need to learn how to rise above this ego, and specifically spirituality is revealed when, as a society, we work on supporting, encouraging each other to rise above this growing ego, to rise above the division, to rise above the hatred, to connect positively above it, and to learn the ways of doing so. That's really what the wisdom of Kabbalah teaches here. So the people of Israel camping at Mount Sinai is all those who have this inclination, this initial inclination to want to connect, to want to do something good, to deal with that ego in some way, and understand that rising above it is the way to do it. And that's why they come together as a society and wish to aim to connect to one another. They discover by doing so, like nuts in a sack, all these people coming together. So obviously you're going to have a lot of egoistic outbursts doing that. You're going to have a lot of hatred coming up between people when you do that. So that's what they discover at this foot of Mount Sinai. And then they united as one man with one heart. That's what it's called in the story. This is the action that they did. That's what's written in the Torah. It's worth writing it here. As one man with one heart. Like I was mentioning before, that our soul, at the moment we feel myself separate from everyone else, like I'm the center of everything, and there's all these other people detached from me as if I have nothing to do with them. Maybe I have something to do with my family at best and some friends and acquaintances, but beyond that, maybe I also, I keep to my nation and to my culture as well. But beyond that, we don't really feel connected to everyone else. But all these people, the people of Israel, are specifically people who had no biological connection to begin with, who came together as a group according to the idea of working to positively connect above their rising ego. That's what Abraham first led them to discover love your friend as yourself, or love your neighbor as yourself, to make that the guiding principle in all of their relations. And when they did so, that's when they became known as the people of Israel. So these people, on another degree of egoism that had emerged, which is called the degree called Mount Sinai, it's the peak period in the exit from Egypt. Egypt too represents the period where these people who wanted to connect were still within the egoistic desires, and it reaches a point where, from the efforts to connect as one man with one heart within the egoistic desires within Egypt, we reach the peak point of Egypt, which is called Mount Sinai, that mountain of hatred, and they camp at the foot of that mount, meaning that they're ready to unite in order to apply love, bestowal, connection above this massive egoistic quality that they feel divides, separates them, and makes them hateful of each other. And then they follow Moses, who is their leader. Moses is it's also the desire for spirituality, what's called the point in the heart. But it's the pure quality, if we put it in terms of the Sefirot, which you could also describe this as, it's the quality of Bina. It's a pure quality of love and bestowal, which is, there you go, there's the B in Bina. It's a pure quality of love and bestowal that is similar to the Creator. Moses is that leading quality who's already attained higher degrees of spiritual connection, and due to his higher attainment, he can be as a leader to these other qualities. Meaning it's that if we follow that pure point for spirituality, that pure point where we want to be connected as one man with one heart within us, and we always are guided by that point, then we always have the guidance to rise above our ego. It also puts forth that there's a leader here, that there's a certain something that if we're searching for that innermost point within us, it's a point where we connect together beyond all that egoistic quality. And if we seek that, that's that point of Moses within us. And if we work with that, then Moses is the one who rises up the mountain, meaning that we, in our spiritual search, meaning in our search to positively connect with one another above the ego, we rise up the mountain. Rising up the mountain means coming closer to the Creator, coming closer to nature in its purest form, becoming more loving, more bestowing. And when we do that, that's when we get those 10 commandments, these laws, these conditions that work within that connection, which keep us connected as that single people, as that single soul in our spiritual state. That's what's revealed at the top of the mountain, meaning that we succeed to rise above the ego, and by that true request to unite and to wish to unite, we follow that quality called Moses, that point in the heart, up the top of the mountain, meaning above the ego, that's where we discover God. And when we discover God, the Creator, nature, we get those laws, those commandments, and they become our laws of connection. They become the laws that our soul abides by, meaning that, contrary to what I mentioned in the very beginning about what, might as well go back to here, contrary to what I said in the beginning about how we commonly think of the 10 Commandments as some kind of moral code, as some kind of moral instructions that God gave us. It's rather not the case here. What we see is that once we attain that state which is above the ego, our connection to that single soul, pure love, bestowal, and connection among each other, through that attainment, we gain access to these conditions which hold that connection, which hold that attainment together. And that is called the 10 Commandments that we get. We'll get into those soon. But that's literally where it comes from, meaning that it's not like we can observe some of these commandments while we're in this world, that we know it, and some we do observe and some we don't observe. To make it very simple, we're not observing any of them at any time in our world because we can't, because they don't relate to our level at all. They all relate to the spiritual level, and when we attain that spiritual level, like with anything in spirituality, every attainment of spirituality is a whole attainment, meaning that when we attain that perfect connection and we become elated and inspired to connect, and we click into that full perception and sensation of ourselves connected as a single soul, so those 10 Commandments all become revealed at once. And what does it mean that they were given to Moses on 2 tablets? Very simply, it's called in the language of Kabbalah, it's called the panim and achoraim, the face and the back of the Creator, meaning that we relate to the light and the darkness, the two opposite states of the Creator, whether we're feeling good or whether we're feeling bad. We have no differentiation between these states. We have no different. We rise above the feelings of good and bad, light and darkness, life and death. We enter into that eternal connection with the Creator and among each other. We attain these things all through and upon that foundation called love your friend as yourself. And that's where these laws, these 10 commandments, become revealed to us. So what are these 10 commandments? Just give me something here. Okay, so what are these 10 commandments? We'll just go through them one by one. And let's open this up over here. All right. There's a nice picture there. All right, just before that, here's a little excerpt from an article called the Arvut by Bala Sulam, where he talks about this state of connecting in order to reveal the Torah, these 10 commandments. All of Israel are responsible for one another. This is to speak of the Arvut, mutual guarantee, or you could call it mutual responsibility that we feel towards another. When all of Israel, meaning all those who wish to attain spirituality, all those who feel the ego is a problem and are given that desire to rise above the ego, they became responsible for one another. So it's possible to reach such a state through this quality of mutual responsibility, where everyone feels everyone else as the center of their self. I can, same way as I'm responsible for myself in this world, that's how it appears to me anyway, because I feel myself as the center of all these desires, pleasures, everything coming into me. So in spirituality, we feel that responsibility, each one for others. And when we reach such a click among each other in the way, it's called that we reach the state called Arvut, and that's when we're actually ready to rise above the ego. Because the Torah, it also comes from two words, light, or, O-H-R, you could call it light, and hora'ah, which means instruction, meaning you could put those together, instruction from the light. That's why we also say that Torah can be translated as the wisdom of Kabbalah, because it's an instruction on how to rise from this world to the spiritual world. That this Torah was not given to them before each and every one from Israel was asked if he agreed to take upon himself the mitzvah, the precept of loving others in the fullest measure, in the full measure, expressed in the words, love thy friend as thyself. Yeah, so that phrase in and of itself, as I mentioned, it's the foundation. That's what Abraham's group, which became known as the people of Israel, was based on. They were based on that full mutual responsibility for one another. They applied love the friend as yourself. They felt the others in the center of themselves. They each felt the others as themselves. And that's what gives rise to this feeling of the soul, of the feeling outside of us, of this eternity and perfection that exists outside of us. When we're acting in this mode of bestowing and giving and caring about fulfilling the desires of others to the same extent that we care for the fulfillment of our own desires and needs. This means that each and every one in Israel would take it upon himself to care and work for each member of the nation and to satisfy all their every needs, no less than the measure imprinted in him to care for his own needs, as I just mentioned. And once the whole nation unanimously agreed and said, we shall do and we shall hear, that they agreed to these conditions that Moses brought down to them from Mount Sinai, that he received from God, each member of Israel became responsible that nothing shall be missing from any other member of the nation. Only then did they become worthy of receiving the Torah and not before. With this collective responsibility, each member of the nation was liberated from worrying about the needs of his own body and could keep the mitzvah, love thy friend as thyself, in the fullest measure, and give all that he had to any needy person, since he no longer cared for the existence of his own body, as he knew for certain that he was surrounded by 600,000 loyal lovers who were standing ready to provide for him. Right? So when we have that collective responsibility and it really clicks into place, and there's a lot to that responsibility. We learn a lot about that in the wisdom of Kabbalah, especially at the more advanced stages when we're studying in groups. and we're implementing that in practice. So this collective responsibility, you see, it frees us, it liberates us from worrying about the needs of our own body. That's also something completely alien to our current perception and sensation of reality, that we have no feeling at all of what it means to be liberated from worrying of our own needs. At the moment, we feel as if we're always serving this ego that's inside us. But specifically, we become liberated from that, and by caring about others, by putting their needs above my own. And because when everyone's acting in that way, then it creates the conditions for these 10 commandments that we're about to go through to dwell among us, for that force, that light of the Creator to come and dwell among us, to be present in our connections. And that's what brings us together as this, as one soul, simply put. It gives us that attainment of spirituality that we're talking about. So let's get into these 10 commandments. Number 1, the first commandment. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. So it's saying that when we attain that state of total connection to each other, of realizing that fullest measure of love your friend as yourself among us, what we realize together with that, in full attainment, perception, sensation, is that there is one force in reality. One force, and it brings us out of the land of Egypt, meaning our egoism, out of the house of slavery, meaning we feel that we're liberated from that egoistic sensation of reality that brings us, at the end of the day, even though we think that we're going after all kinds of enjoyments and pleasures, we're tricked, because it's always leading us to a point where we're never able to be truly fulfilled. And at the end of the day, only suffering ends up mounting more and more and more. And so, and when we realize that we're like a slave, at the end of the day, if you look at us from the side, where it's like someone's dingling a carrot in front of us all the time, and we're always trying to grab it. And sometimes we might grab it, and then the moment we grab it, it's almost like it disappears from our hands, and there's another one dangling there. And this is our reality. We're like, this is the reality of our world, of living in the ego, the house of slavery. So when we discover the liberation from that, we actually discover the full perception and sensation of a single force, that force that the Kabbalists call God, Creator, nature, which is defined as a force of love and bestowal, love, giving, caring, which allows us to care for others as we naturally care for ourselves, and which brings us out of that sensation of this separated, divided self from others. So this is the first commandment. The second commandment, you shall not make for yourself a graven image, nor any manner of likeness of anything that is in heaven above, that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So, simply put, don't imagine, don't fantasize, don't try to put any picture in your head of anything but this one force of love and bestowal that dwells in our connection. If we exert to connect and reveal in practice this one force of love and bestowal, then that's what we will get. If not, then we'll go for other things, and we'll perceive a multiplicity of forces. As you can see, even with these first 2 commandments, it's impossible to keep these in our world, because naturally every single thing that is in our world, the very perception of time, space, motion, is against the notion of perceiving and sensing only one force. Even the fact that we are born and we grow up, there's at least 2 forces in action, because there's always something and something else that's resisting, and change is a result of 2 or more forces. So you can see here that it's already impossible to keep these first 2 commandments simply at the level of perception of our world. But the Kabbalists say that when we rise in this perception through focusing on that central point of love your friend as yourself, and connecting to one another in such a way, which gives us that spiritual elation and inspiration, and eventually brings us out of that slavery to that egoistic quality. So then we do in fact perceive that there is one force. We gain access to that sensation of eternity, harmony, wholeness. And these 2 commandments play out for us in practice. We'll move on. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. It simply means that we should aspire for specifically one goal which is, as I keep mentioning, that point where we all connect as a single soul with that quality of the Creator dwelling among our connections. Anything that is not aimed in that direction ultimately comes back into this natural drive to egoistically want to receive and perceive for my own personal benefit. So, if we're aimed in that direction towards that single goal, then we cannot take anything of the name of the Lord, the Creator, the quality of bestowal. We cannot use it for personal benefit, meaning using it in vain. There's another thing here, because what we see with the Ten Commandments, what we're seeing is there's some that say do this, and there's others which say, don't do this, like you shall not. And the previous one was also you shall not. What we have to understand about these don't do ones, the you shall not, is also something which specifically relates to spirituality, where a prohibition, something that we don't do, again, it's not a moral prohibition. It's not something where it's telling us, take this and take this instruction to don't do something and then try not to do it. Because at the end of the day, if we treat it as morality, then we're always trying not to do something. It's up to us to not to do that. In spirituality, it's not like that at all. The prohibition in spirituality is equal to impossibility, meaning that if we're at a level where we're perceiving as a single soul above the ego, with the law of nature, love your friend as yourself, dwelling among us, then these laws are naturally playing out. It's a new nature that we acquire, and according to that new nature, these are the laws that are in effect, meaning it's impossible to be at that level of spiritual attainment if these laws aren't existent there. It's not something that once we reach there, we have to try not to do this or something like that, but rather this is a result of that force of the Creator coming down from above according to our efforts to connect and giving us that new nature, and we're living in that new nature as a result of that. So as you can see here, the only do action really out of all of this so far at its foundation is that if we have that initial desire for spirituality, if we feel that desire called Israel within us, then the main thing is always to aim in a direction of love your friend as yourself, positively connecting to others, uniting above the divisive drives that appear in us, which we don't have to be ashamed about. It's a part of our nature. We get all kinds of divisive drives, we get all kinds of hate, we get all kinds of things, the most terrible thoughts and feelings in the world. They all come to any Kabbalist, and they all come to every person. It's perfectly natural. It's all given to us in order to give us more and more desire to rise above that, to apply more and more of that mutual responsibility to rise above it and reach these states where we attain such a perception where all these laws play out. Let's move on to the next one. The fourth commandment: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So all of these transformations that we undergo on the path are called corrections of the desire to receive for personal benefit, which is our inborn desire, and transforming that into a desire to bestow and love, which is the desire of the Creator, the spiritual desire. The Sabbath is a point where we have the weekdays where we work, meaning that we have the time of working to connect above the ego, where it can often feel a bit unpleasant because the ego is tricking us in all kinds of ways and doing all kinds of things in order to resist connection, and it's like we have to work against the resistance. And we have that point where after all that exertion we reach a prayer. Again, it's a sincere desire to connect, to love, to bestow above our inborn egoism, to apply that quality of the Creator above our egoism. And that is where we reveal the Sabbath. That is called remembering the Sabbath day, keeping it holy. It has nothing to do with the 7 days of the week as we currently know it, meaning that we can experience this inner state called the Sabbath on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday. It's all to do with a break in the work. The word for Sabbath in Hebrew as well comes from the word shvita, which means a break in the work. So it's a point where after exerting to connect to one another, we get this illumination from above, we get help and support from above, which raises us, and it's called the correction of a desire. For us, it's a break in the work. We get elated, inspired, all this connection and love that we were aiming for while we were buried in our egoism suddenly reveals to us. It's a great spiritual state. And then the weekday starts again. The new egoistic desire appears. We have to work against it again. We have to work above it. And that's the process of our corrections. The fifth commandment. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God has given you. So again, we know our mother and father in this world, and we normally commonly think of this one as a very easy commandment to do, because by nature we generally honor the mother and the father, especially as babies. That you see by nature they naturally adhere to everything that the mother and father do for them, because they're babies and they can't really resist. And then the more we grow up, the more we start, going into anti-mode and all these things. Anyway, that's some kind of a demo of what we're talking about in spirituality. In spirituality, we're saying that there's these systems in nature, spiritual systems above what we currently perceive, which act on us. In the wisdom of Kabbalah, it's called Chokhmah and Chasadim, literally the lights of reception and lights of bestowal. But in short, they work as these two forces towards us, which help elevate us above our ego. All we need to do is raise their importance. That means honoring them, honoring these systems that exist in nature that stem down from the Creator. And the more we raise their importance, raise them as being greater than ourselves, these forces of bestowal, these forces coming from the Creator, let them teach us, let them guide us and support us, then it lets us become elevated to their level. And that's what it means to honor the father and the mother, meaning we're raising the greatness of spirituality, in short, above the importance of corporeality and all these corporeal desires we do. And when we do that, which is a rather artificial action because we don't naturally feel spirituality as being more important, but when we do that, then we're awarded with these systems actually elevating us. You shall not kill. Killing, in relation to our connection to each other, means cutting off the connection to each other. At the very basis, killing means that I receive a pleasure for my own personal benefit. I use or exploit another for my own personal benefit. That's what killing is. It's not killing as we know it in this world. What does it kill? Because how do we rise into spirituality? We rise by developing our desire for spirituality. We develop our desire and yearning for spirituality by honoring the mother and the father, as I said earlier, raising the importance and greatness of spirituality above our current importance. And we do that with other people who have this desire by judging them favorably, by looking for their points in the heart, by looking for their spiritual desire through all this egoistic picture that reveals to me. This becomes very evident, especially for a person who's working in a group atmosphere, because in a group, we get guidelines where we see other people often in certain ways, where we naturally don't like this or that about another person, but we also get instructions for how to penetrate beyond that and actually appreciate and see that soul working in each one, seeing that point where we're all equal and working to support, encourage each other to raise the importance of that point above everything else, where we connect as a single soul. So anything that we do that goes against that, meaning we let this criticism of another, we let this hatred of another, division toward another, we let slander and all kinds of negative thoughts about another enter us, that's called killing this desire for spirituality, because at that point we detach ourselves from spirituality. We get into a corporeal, egoistic mode where any desire we receive in that mode, just as we know it in this world, any desire we have, you could say food at its very basis, we might be very hungry. The moment we start to eat, that desire for hunger gets killed, right? We're actually killing that desire because we We were hungry, that desire is active, and then we start eating, and then we're killing that desire for food, which is very natural in this world. I'm not saying you should always be hungry, but in spirituality, when we're wanting to rise spiritually, we're actually wanting to develop that spiritual hunger more and more and more, in order for that state called Sabbath, in order for the Creator to come and dwell in that desire and to fulfill that. So anything we do which disconnects us from others in the process, that's called killing that desire. That's what it means, thou shalt not kill, in spirituality. You shall not commit adultery. So adultery means that we have all these deficiencies before us that we can fulfill. Each one of us in our spiritual work, we reveal when we enter spiritual levels that there's all these desires that specifically we can fulfill with love and bestowal. Those desires are called wife. Again, it's got nothing to do with the wife in this world. It's to do with these, specifically this field of desires that we can work with and fulfill. Anything outside of that field, if we go to try to fulfill it, we mightn't have the right amount of intention or ability to rise above the ego to fulfill that. So when we do that, it comes again into our egoism. So you can already kind of see parallels here with adultery in this world, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about spiritually, because here we're talking about the growth of the spiritual desire and how we keep that desire growing. So it means that we focus specifically on these desires that we can fulfill, and meaning focus specifically on these desires that we can bestow to, and other desires that appear to us that we mightn't be able to bestow to, so we put a restriction on them and we don't serve them for the time being, because we know that we can't relate to those desires in a manner of bestowal and love. That's, you shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. Similar to the other two, it's all in relation to not receiving for personal benefit here. That stealing in spirituality, it's also very different to stealing in this world. Stealing in this world is very clear. Something's not yours, you take it, without paying for it in some kind of way, it's stealing. In spirituality, it's completely different. Stealing means that we can participate to the fullest extent in a manner of love, in a manner of bestowal, in a manner of positively connecting to others, in order to bring that spiritual force into the world, in order to simply be in that state of mutual responsibility, taking full care and loving others' desires as we love our own, being in that state according to the skills one's given, talents, abilities. We have a certain 100% that we can be in that serving toward that soul. If I'm even 1% off, if I'm not participating to my fullest in that, that's considered a level of stealing that I have toward spirituality. That's stealing at a spiritual level. Something within my participation in the system which is lacking, which I didn't put in to it at a certain extent, that's called stealing. And again, there's no people here like police officers around to tell you that you're stealing. Only oneself can be the judge of this in his spiritual work. Move to the 9th, because we're nearly out of time. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So I'm a witness, I'm a participant, I'm a partner to everything that's happening around to everyone. If there's a certain fault, if there's a certain problem, if there's a certain crisis happening to someone even on the other part of the world, if someone's experiencing some sort of suffering, I'm responsible for that. If I think that I'm not responsible for that, it's called bearing false witness against them, meaning a person doesn't take full responsibility for the whole soul as themselves. So that's the spiritual definition of not bearing false witness against their neighbor. You can see here how it's different to how we normally think about it. Again, this really puts that principle of mutual responsibility at the very center of importance here. And finally, the last one, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The 10th commandment, the final commandment, means that this is really the completion of all the commandments. These 10 commandments also connect to the 10 Sefirot. All these commandments relate to a certain Sefirot. This is the last Sefirah of Malchut here. where all the Ten Commandments reach their full completion. Really what this saying, this whole matter of you shall not covet, meaning even the thought, we're not even talking about the action of doing these things, but even the slightest thought of doing anything, any possible harm to anything in this system, to receiving anything from this system for personal benefit, we reach such a level that even the thought towards that doesn't appear in us. This is what it means, that this is the full completion of the Ten Commandments, that that there's no awakening in thought, in desire, in action, of doing any possible harm, of receiving anything for personal benefit, but we're in a state of pure love above the ego. Love your friend as yourself. It's also called love will cover all transgressions. Love will cover all, meaning that it's above the state of the ego. And we reach a state where we completely identify with that spiritual attainment, with that love, with that bestowal that we attained. And in conclusion, we can literally forget about these Ten Commandments as some kind of laws, as some kind of things that we should be trying to follow and apply to ourselves on a day-to-day basis as we have in the past. If we just take that main overriding leading principle, which turned ordinary people and put them into a process of spiritual attainment to reach a state where they become one soul, that principle which is called love your friend as yourself, if we take that as the foundation for everything we do, and we learn through this method how to apply that, because one of the main problems with this love your friend as yourself is lots of people think that they do that, but really there's a whole method to do that, because when we really understand the extent to which we love ourselves, that we're in a state of naturally wanting to receive pleasure for our personal benefit at every single moment, unconsciously, and sometimes maybe we can consciously get some image of that. So to really undergo an inversion of our whole human nature to one which is in pure love and bestowal for others. So that's the essence of the whole method here. That's the whole essence of this story where the Ten Commandments are revealed. The Ten Commandments become revealed as a result of working specifically on that point, of working to positively connect, love, and bestow to others above this natural state we're in, above this egoistic state we're in. So that really becomes the main focus here. And the Ten Commandments, it's something that becomes revealed as a result of that. It's not something we should take and think, how do we apply this, and maybe we're observing this but not observing that, etc., etc. So that's all we have time for today. Everyone who's in Kabu, we're going to go now to have the Q&A session, which is going to be an hour of Q&A, and also Joseph Asaf Ochayon will be there as well, and we look very much forward to seeing you. If you're not registered to Kabu yet, just follow the links in the chat and you'll be able to register, and there we all meet on Zoom. It's much more, you could say, informal than this, and it's all just Q&A and we all have a good time. And you also have lots of courses there at Kabu that you can take. A lot of these concepts have whole courses just dedicated to them. So we'll see you there very, very shortly, and have a good night and day if you're in a daytime area. See you later.